This is a reimagined Power Four for modern college football. The idea of a Power Four has taken a bit of getting used to because the way that college football has been set up for so many years, it's made sense for there to be 5 different conferences that have the strongest teams in the country. Of course, the moves of Texas and Oklahoma, UCLA and USC, and then of course Oregon and Washington have thrown that into complete chaos at this point. But there is a little bit of sense in a Power Four setup when you really start to look at how the college football playoff is currently set up with the 12 teams and where it will be going if we go to 16 or even 24 teams. The Power Four kind of makes sense if we can stay at that. We'll see if it gets to 3 or 2 conferences by the time we change the playoffs yet again. The problem with the Power Four is that geographically it makes no sense. We have this kind of band from LA up the West Coast and across the top of the United States over to New Jersey. That's the Big Ten. We have kind of the reverse of that with California, Texas, and then the Eastern Seaboard as the ACC. The SEC is really the only one that makes sense, even though they're the ones that have made this whole chaos happen. And then there's the Big 12, which is just a smattering of teams across the country, any way that they could get in their conference so they could put a media rights deal together for some kind of value. But today, what we're going to do is take the teams that are in the Power Four, for the most part, and put them into geographical conferences that make sense and make a 16-team playoff that's a little bit different than what we've been pitching previously. See, because a big part of this is everyone saying that the way the college football playoff should be set up is all conference champions should go into the college football playoff just like the FCS. Although it's completely different with the FBS and the FCS, so there's no way that would ever happen where there's a team from Conference USA, current Conference USA, that would get the same rights afforded to it as a Big Ten or SEC conference champion. So we're going to reset that using both of these ideas, a new Power Four, geographically aligned, and a playoff that rewards conference champions and conference champions only, and take it from there. So first, let's start with the conferences. We'll go with the first one, which is a combination of the Pac-12 and the Big 12. The Big Pac looks like this. In our Forest Division, we have Washington, Oregon, Stanford, and Cal. In the Mountain Division, we have Utah, BYU, Texas Tech, and Colorado. In the Desert Division, we've got USC, UCLA, Arizona, and Arizona State. And the Plains Division is Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State. So I think obviously you could point out that Texas Tech not being with the other Texas teams might be weird, but for the most part, I've made Lubbock kind of its own thing. A Texas Tech can either go with Texas or it can go with other kind of mountain rangey teams. And in this particular setup, it makes more sense for them to go with the mountain teams. And then, but the rest of this, I think, makes a lot of sense geographically. And there's also like classic rivals, of course, Washington, Oregon, Stanford, Cal. We miss out on Oregon State and Washington State, but when you really get down to it, it makes sense why they got left behind. Every conference had a chance to add Oregon State and Washington State, and they've passed on it for years. So that's just the reality of modern college athletics. Washington State and Oregon State just don't hold the power that a lot of the power conference teams have. USC and UCLA with Arizona and Arizona State. You could have kept the California teams together, but I think it makes more sense for them to go with Arizona with the rest of the setup that we have here. And then, of course, Baylor and TCU stay together, Oklahoma State and Iowa State stay together. I don't know that Oklahoma State and Iowa State have a lot of classic rivalries together, but at least the Big 8 teams stay together in that particular sense, outside of Colorado, which makes more sense with the Utah teams. And yes, we have this divisional setup, and I originally thought let's just use it for scheduling, but really what we're going to do here is the winners of each of these divisions is going to get a spot in the playoff. We'll show you what that looks like when we get all of them through, but the winner of each of these divisions is going to get a spot in the playoffs, and we'll talk more about scheduling and how all that's going to work out when we get there. But next, let's go with the Big 10. First, we have the Cornfields Division, which is Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska. Next, we have the Northeast. This is the weirdest division of them. Michigan, Maryland, Rutgers, and Michigan State. Next is the Central, Indiana, Illinois, Purdue, and Northwestern, and then the Rust Belt, which is Penn State, Ohio State, West Virginia, and Pitt. So the original division for the Northeast was actually going to be called the Erie Division, and it was going to be Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Penn State, which made sense from a scheduling perspective, but Of course, when we decided to go with the division winners being in the playoff, you don't want Ohio State and Michigan to be fighting for a playoff spot, especially Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Those are the three best teams in the Big Ten. So maybe you could have two of them in the same division, but not all three of them. And we wanted to keep West Virginia and Pitt together. And then, at some point it was going to be West Virginia, Pitt, Maryland, Rutgers. The winner of that was going to go to the playoffs. So made more sense for it to be set up this way. Maybe Michigan gets somewhat of an easy road there, but Michigan State definitely has competed for the playoffs in years past. Maybe they'll do it again once they fire Jonathan Smith. Now we'll go to the ACC. We've got the Colonial Division, which is Virginia, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, and BC. The Tropical Division, Miami, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Clemson. The Western Division, which is Kansas State, Kansas, SMU, and Louisville. And then Carolina is just the North Carolina teams. North Carolina, Duke, Wake Forest, and NC State. The ACC is by far the most unbalanced of the conferences and is going to get our weirdest playoff participants. Virginia, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, BC. Of course, Virginia Tech has had that kind of success in their years with Frank Beamer and with Michael Vick. Virginia might be a good team this year. It's kind of hard to tell, but they're on their way to potentially a playoff berth this season. So that's going to be one of the weirdest ones. Obviously, Carolina is also going to be one of the weirdest ones. North Carolina has had success. Duke's had success, but they all suck right now. So that's going to be the worst playoff participant. The Western Division, SMU, obviously went to the playoff last year. Louisville has been a top 10 team. We put Kansas in here because there was not really another place to put Kansas. It was either going to be Kansas or Cincinnati and UCF. The Kansas schools are more power schools than Cincinnati or UCF, so they made it into the ACC in this weird division. And in the Tropical Division, the best team out of the ACC in most years is going to come out of the Tropical Division. And that's just how it's going to be. That's what the setup is. You got to win your division. If you don't win your division, then you're not the best team in the country. That's the idea of this. If you don't win your division, then you're not the best team in the country, so you don't have any complaints. And then finally, we have the SEC. Starting with the Old West, we've got Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas A&M, all the Big 12 schools. We've got the Eastern Division, which is South Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia, and Florida. The River Valley, which is Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Auburn. And then the Mississippi, which is LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. So again, originally what we were going to have here was Georgia and Florida with Alabama and Auburn, but then we made the switch to making these division winners go to the playoff, and it didn't make sense to have all four of those teams together. I mean, Florida maybe and Auburn stick out, but I mean, all of those teams have been national champions post the BCS, which is, pretty big. We do have three BCS national champions or CFP national champions in the River Valley, but Tennessee has been since 97. Auburn won in 2011. I think they were there in 2014, but they won in 2011. And then, of course, Alabama. Whatever divisional setup you put Alabama in, because you can find a way to put them in with LSU, it's going to be difficult to do. But the Old West also has two BCS national champions and multiple playoff winners in Texas and Oklahoma. So the SEC, of course, is stacked. We know this. They dominated the late BCS era. The Big 12 dominated some of the BCS era, and then, of course, they dominated the CFP era. So it's going to be slightly unbalanced in the SEC. You can always have those complaints, but it just means more there, so you're going to have better teams. And then I know these divisional names maybe aren't great. It's kind of hard. Like, it's really easy in the Pac-12, Big 12 mashup to come up with names, but when you start getting into the East, there's a lot of teams that are a lot closer that don't hold like an entire region down, so it becomes harder to come up with a name that makes sense regionally for those teams. So if you have better ideas for any of the conferences, please comment those below. But yeah, so talking about scheduling with these divisions, of course, everyone's going to play their teams within the division every single year. So there's 3 games that are locked down in your conference every single year. And then there's going to be, up to 2 protected rivals for outside of your division. So of course, Michigan and Ohio State will play every single season. I think that right now, like Alabama and Georgia could be a protected rival, or Alabama LSU. I know that Alabama has a couple different rivals, so there can be protected ones outside of your division. But then you're also going to play, 6 additional teams in your conference. So the 3 in your division, 6 additional teams. Of those 6, it can be up to 2 protected rivals. Otherwise, it will just cycle through like a regular conference schedule would, unlike, a past SEC's conference schedule or a current Big Ten schedule where it's made for the best teams to win every single season. It will actually cycle through as it should, where you play each team, in a somewhat regular cycle for three or 4 years apart. But yeah, it's all going to culminate in a 16-team playoff like this. So the Big Ten will all go into its own, the Big 12 will all go into its own bracket, the SEC will all go into its own bracket, and the ACC will all go into its own bracket, and they will be just the divisional winners. And like I said, the idea about this is that if you don't win your division, you cannot be the best team in the country. And that's what we want, right? That's what we want. We're the best teams in the country. We don't want a setup where a team like Ohio State, who obviously lost and didn't show up at the table to have a chance to get in, because yeah, they might be the best team. They might be the most talented team. They might get the best, be the best setup for a playoff scenario, but they did not perform in the regular season. And we want the regular season to matter, right? I remember people talking about that game last year where they're like, it all comes down to this. This means everything. Well, Ohio State lost its biggest game of the season. And a game where their coach, people were talking about their coach being fired. And then they come back and they have an incredible run and they end up winning it. That's great. But it didn't matter that they lost to their arch rival who was barely a bowl team last year. Now, there's good things and bad things about that, but in this setup, you have to win your divisional games. There are 3 games that matter every single season, and you need to win those 3 games. Regardless of what else happens, you need to make sure you win those 3 games. Otherwise, your season is a failure, because most likely you're going to need to go 3-0 in your division to win it. 2-1, you're leaving the door open for somebody else to win it, and they might have a better setup in their conference schedule to win with their conference record. Because yeah, what's going to be is first thing is the divisional record. The second thing, if there's any ties, is the conference record, the overall conference record. And if there's a tie with that, obviously it goes to head-to-head and all those kind of things. But the first thing is your divisional record. And then the way that you'll be ranked within your conference as you get into the playoff will be based on conference record. So not only does it make you win your divisional games, it also keeps importance in conference games. Non-conference games really lose importance in this. And I think that's the thing with college football is we've got so focused on these non-conference games, so focused on playing the big game so we get these ratings and stuff. It actually matters what you do within your conference. That is what's intrinsic to college football. That's the thing that's different with college sports than any other sport is conferences, is the weird regional thing that has always been so important. And yes, we're losing it a little bit, and we would lose it in this too. I mean, we've got Oregon in the same conference as Baylor, and we've got Kansas in the same conference as Boston College and Miami, but at least this relays the importance of whatever conference you're in. That still has something in college football, and it would matter in this scenario. And that's the other thing with this. Not only do you need to beat your divisional opponents in the regular season, not only do you need to get a good conference record to help your seeding for the playoffs, you also need to beat 2 different divisional opponents to even get to the Final Four, and then you need to beat which would be your conference rival. So we go back to the Big Ten and the Big 12 are always going to play each other to get into that West Final. The SEC and the ACC are always going to need to play each other to get into that East Final. So it will develop rivalries because there are teams that are going to dominate their conference over a span. Miami is going to dominate the ACC sometimes. Virginia might dominate the ACC sometimes. Alabama's going to dominate the SEC sometimes. Ohio State obviously is always going to be near the top of the Big Ten. Oregon, USC, they're going to dominate the Big 12. So they will then develop these conference rivals with the other dominant teams. And it's not just going to be this crapshoot thing that the 12-team playoff is right now, where it's just kind of like whoever's the best resume or whoever, happens to have played the easiest schedule really in a lot of these 12-team things, it turns out to be, that then you end up playing them and it's like you get a random game where it's Boise State at Penn State. Like, it's cool that Boise State and Penn State play, but that doesn't really matter to anybody. Other than the stakes that you're going to move on, that game doesn't have any additional relevance to it. These games have additional relevance to it. They have built-in rivalries. They have conference rivalries. They have these things that make games great outside of just whatever the stakes are when you win the game. And by no means am I saying that this is the absolute best way of doing this. But if you want if you want to kind of combine the top level teams that we're cutting out the fat, so to say, in college football and having these top level teams in the conferences together, and you want to have somewhat of a regional feel to things, and you want to have just conference champions or just people that have proven their worth, and not a ranking system. This moves completely away from a ranking system, and not a ranking system that picks who's in the playoff. This is it. You might not get the absolute best teams every single season, but the best teams should still win, because if you're one of the best teams, in the country, you should be able to win your division. If you're the best team in the country, which is what the national championship is saying, if you're the best team in the country, you will win your division. If you're the best team in the country, you will beat 2 conference opponents in the playoff. If you're the best team in the country, you will beat the conference champion of the other team in your region, in the East or in the West. If you're the best team in the country, you will beat the other team in the national championship. That's what it's going to end up being. If Ohio State was the best team in the country last season, which they kind of obviously were at the end, they would have beaten Michigan as well. If you mess up, you pay for it. That's sports. If you lose, you lose. It's not you lose and you get a chance to win again the same season. You lose, and you're out. But thanks for watching that video. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and make sure you hype the video as well, because as a small content creator, I can use all the help I can get, and the hype is the best way to do it. If you made it this far, make sure that you leave a comment and let me know what you think. Do you think that divisions are a good way to kind of get the best teams in the playoff without a ranking system? Or do you think that the rankings are doing adequate work and at least we get like the best 8 or 9 teams, even if the last couple spots maybe are a little bit iffy? If you want to watch more of my videos, I do have those for you. On this side, I've got my most recent video, which is a video about the Big East collapsing in 2004 and what college football would look like after that. It's a realignment remix, so check it out if you like those videos. On the top there, I've got my most popular video, which is my perfect Power 5, so check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Other than that, I got my subscribe link on this side, and we'll check you next time. See ya!